Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Goldfish Report. I'm your host, Louisa. And today is September 19th, 2018. And this is a very special Goldfish Report. And of course, I have my co host, Winston Shrout, joining me. How are you, Winston?
Well, I'm doing okay.
Thanks for being here, Winston. And of course, we have a very special, two special guests joining us today for a really special Goldfish Report. And you can see we have Chewbacca in the background, and it couldn't be any more appropriate. I think our viewers know what's coming. And of course, we have with us James Gilliland from the Isetti Ranch and also Peter Flattery from Isetti, Australia. So thanks to both of you for joining us.
Oh, good. Thanks for having us on.
Thank you.
The volume's still a little bit low. We're having some technical difficulties. Not surprising. This does happen on Goldfish Reports with topics of interest that are very interesting. But what we're going to do is we're going to start out, and James, I know we wanted to talk about this uncontrolled narrative movie that I know I posted it all over Facebook as well. It came into my news feed, and then I watched it, and it was very interesting. And I wanted to know what really compelled you to to start to do this short little video clip called "The Uncontrolled Narrative," which I thought was wonderful.
Yeah. Well, basically, what we found out is that we're probably one of the most censored. Got it all the way up.
You okay?
Yeah, we're doing the best we can. I don't know what's going on here. I've never seen anything like this, but our computer has a gremlin in it, and it's moving the volume. And so we locked the volume down, and now it's just doing it somewhere else. I don't know where it's doing it, but anyway, what happened was within the field of ufology, it seems like they always have the same players. They get a shiny new face and somebody famous, and they pop on, but it's always the same players in the background. And they're still trying to act like they're proven that UFOs exist. And it's so ridiculous that we go, well, why hasn't it evolved from there? I mean, after 60 years of people talking about this, they're saying, they're still doing the same thing, and they're trying to get the government to admit UFOs exist. And we're going, well, when is this going to evolve to, okay, we all know they're here. Even Time CNN polls are up in the high 80s, 90%. A Texas poll had 99% that people believe that UFOs exist and there is a cover-up. So I think that the cover-up is a total fail, if you look at the polls. Yeah. And I don't know why they continue with this, but why do we keep giving them all this power to tell us that, that these are real? I mean, 99% of the people already know it's real, so what's the point? But they keep on the same venue of saying, we're going to get the government to tell us the truth. They're going to come clean. They're going to come. And it's almost like, oh, so they've been lying to you for 60 years, using deadly force to keep this thing quiet. And all of a sudden they're just going to turn around because of why and tell you the truth. And whatever they tell you is going to be altered anyway. So we've seen this over and over again, and we just got tired of even the field of ufology is so infiltrated by, some people just have massive egos. Some people have a lot of disinformation and shills, and they believe that information. There's planned opposition in there where they're actually have their hand behind them getting a check, and then all anti-government on the other side, and screaming and yelling. The top of the food chain is totally planned opposition in the field of ufology. So we've been watching this for a long time. Finally said, well, we're just going to put out the uncontrolled narrative, and and getting some top well-known people that have come to the ranch, have seen the ships, have seen the contacts happening, the pre-knowledge of the ships coming, when and where they're going to show up, everything all documented on film with thousands of witnesses here, actually tens of thousands of witnesses. So, we thought we'd just start bringing on some very high caliber people, top people, to talk about, what they've seen here and to take it to the next level.
really start having a conversation about it, which is really what this program does. Let me, I'm going to screen share, have it queued up at a really amazing part in the movie. But let me talk to Peter first, because this is Peter's first time on the Goldfish Report, so welcome. Peter, tell us what's going on in Australia. You have ECETI Australia down there, and what is it like down there and then coming up here and spending time on the ranch with James?
It's different. It's sort of been a little bit of rest, though. We've been flat out with projects and a lot of work we're doing. But I've got ECETI Australia, and we're not sort of located in one place at the moment. I go around the country doing different events and talks and skywatches. But we're looking at being based in one area soon, with about 100 acres and some structures on there where we'll be doing something similar to James. But I've been working with James now for about 5 years, and we've been pretty much in line with where things are at. So, and our contact experiences are similar to each other as well. But it's very active here on the ranch. It seems to be more amplified psychically in terms of contact psychically wise. I'm probably one of the most documented cases on the planet, but a lot of my stuff seems to be more physical. Even this morning, James and I had a sighting just going down the road for breakfast at the gas station. And it's just always something happening here at the ranch. But, you know, James holds space here so people can come and experience it, whether it's with otherworldly beings or get healings, you know, new technologies and sciences and all this sort of stuff and counselling work. All this is going on at the ranch. So it's never a dull day around the ECETI Ranch at all.
Well, that's what I hear. And, of course, that's what I saw in the video. Winston, you've been there. So why don't you tell us what it was like for you?
Well, yeah, I've spent some time up there for a number of years now. And, you know, well, I'll put it this way. I go to bed early. So I told everybody, kept saying, you know, stay up late and watch all this, you know. And I kept saying, well, if a ship lands and somebody gets out and asks for me by name, come wake me up. Otherwise, I'm going to bed. It's it's very, very, very common, the things that happen there. I especially like to watch Mount Adams and the activity that goes on there, and certainly in the production they put together, there's a lot of that footage. So that's good.
Well, Peter, you were saying something about like psychically. What's it like? What's going on energetically there? Does anybody really? I mean, James, maybe you could answer that.
Well, Peter's had some. I want to say one thing about Peter. He's probably got the best footage on the planet. I mean, of metallic craft, undeniable craft, and he actually has beings appearing in his living room. The Pleiadians actually appeared, and he's got photographs of it. And I was there. I was at his house, and I saw the activity there. So without a doubt, I know it's real. So I just wanted to say that. But you know, as far as the energies here, basically you have to rise to the occasion. These are very spiritually and technologically advanced beings. And, you know, a lot of people in the government don't know what's going on because they haven't risen to the occasion. They're still playing around in 3D, you know, and trying to, you know, make mass destruction toys and stuff like that. And so it's like they're not in the right mindset to have these contacts or these connections. So they know they're real, they know they're happening, but they don't have access because, you know, it takes, you know, you have to have an open mind, loving heart, and pure intent. And we have to realize we're dealing with some very ancient beings. Some were our ancestors in the past. They're very spiritually and technologically advanced. And we have to rise to the occasion and you know, they have to have a reason for contacting us. You know, if we are going to do something beneficial from the planet, those are the people that they contact.
Well, why don't I screen share a clip, because this is just exciting. This is really, really exciting. And this is this is a point where you're interviewing people. And I love your sign, Bigfoot Crossing. Can you tell us where this is before I start to play the clip?
Yeah, this is the pond that we have on the property, and it's just on the other side of the guest house, and there's a beautiful pond there. We do have a lot of Bigfoot crossing through on a regular basis as well. So
it's funny you should say that, because we have one right here. We have our Chewbacca in the background. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and play this clip from here, because this is one of the most amazing things I've ever seen, really, and Chewbacca is going to be commenting as we go along.
Because through that lower frequency and lower vibration, they can actually keep control over millions, maybe even billions of people, versus once we start to ascend, there's no holding us back. So I think that's why.
Oh, he is. He's powering up. Woo-hoo! Whoa, look at that. Look at that. Woo-hoo! Whoa. Whoa, that was an incredible one. That was a nice, I got it all on film. I got that one on film. That was a white out your screen moment.
So there you have it. And, you know, these are not simply merely satellites, as many would suggest, that they're basically just satellites that are, you know, in orbit that we're seeing. That clearly wasn't.
Well, we use J-Tracker, we use Heavens Above, we use their database to distinguish on whether or not these are any of the known visible satellites. And people have to realize when you look at satellites, you have to look under visible satellites, because there are a lot of satellites up there, but they're not visible to the naked eye. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is that we had pre-knowledge of this. This was on my birthday, and I asked them for a birthday present if they could just come over the house and power up and get some good footage. And so they did. That evening they flew right over the house and powered up. And these don't behave like satellites. Some of them are going several thousand miles an hour. They make right angle turns. You know, they're flying in treetop level. Mm-hmm. You know, they're powering up on request. There's so many elements that would eliminate any kind of a satellite.
Right, and so reportedly there are some satellites, and I have a photo here that I'm going to share. I'm trying to pull it up any minute of a satellite that apparently crashed. Now, what's interesting about it is that, you know, we did hear Q talk about, for those who are familiar with QAnon, talk about satellites being taken out and servers being or taken out or put down. That were part of the deep state infrastructure. I don't really want to talk about politics too much here, but let me also just screen share that, because I wanted your opinion on what this could possibly be. This is actually the Goldfish Report 24/7 news page, where I post. There's, you know, just it's a 24/7 news page, so everything gets posted here, including James's posts. So I'm going to just make this a little bit larger, and you can see this came down, and yeah.
How did it come down intact? That's amazing.
Well, yeah.
Well, here you can see what's hanging in the tree. There's a huge balloon attached to this.
Yeah, that's not a satellite, because if it had fallen from a very great distance, it would have burned up on re-entry.
Yeah.
Right. So what is it?
Looks like somebody put a balloon up and was doing something with it.
Yeah.
Well, it came down in this remote area that these, and it's, I guess it's Spanish speaking. I'm not sure. But this is pretty good condition. Yeah, I'm not sure what it is. So
I think they're doing some kind of like an atmospheric testing, you know, with
that's low altitude stuff.
Okay. Well, some people were suggesting it was a satellite, but
it's not.
You know, but we know that there's satellites up there. So, but they don't respond to you
right now. They've been misusing space and taking war into space for some time right now. And the higher dimensional beings said, you know,
right,
we can't do that. And so, so many rockets have blown up on the launch pads and upon launch and things like that. And that's because they've been breaking the rules.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So let me just go to another portion of the clip here where I think this is Peter talking, and we can get some feedback and comments about what you're saying here. So I thought these were, and maybe you can also tell us where this is on the ranch first too, okay?
And do you think the spiritual component of this is also a threat?
I think the spiritual component is a majority of the threat in terms of, it's like why people like us film the crafts. It's not because we're nuts and bolts, it's because we've got the spiritual component. And they want to see mainstream ufology, and society want to see the nuts and bolts. We've got the nuts and bolts crafts and that, but the crafts are symbiotic. They've got a relationship with the pilot. The technology is far advanced, and we're even working on this behind the scenes. But the spiritual component is a majority. It all comes from your heart and the spirit connecting to universal, consciousness, being at that level of consciousness to connect with the being. So they try to block that, because that's why we got contact, is we've got the spiritual component. And if you don't have that and you keep the populace from not having that, you keep the control. You keep them in the dark, just thinking that, once you die, that's all it.
Yeah, we can.
That's an interesting comment that you made there, Peter. And I apologize if I said your name wrong. I'm sorry. It is Slattery. Yeah, the accent there is a little hard to tell. What were you talking about there? If you want to just give our viewers a little idea.
Well, it's just bringing in the spiritual aspects. For so long now, whether it's been the media or other UFO groups in general, everything comes down to the consciousness aspect and the spiritual aspect. And so James, I know, has been going through this, talking about this for years, and a lot of the groups didn't want to hear it, but it's got to the point now where we know that they exist. We're going on a cycle as a community in the UFO field. And it's not about the crafts. It's about the beings. It's about why they're coming here, why they're interacting with this. And it's all got to do with consciousness. That's what it comes down to. So you've got to look at all the aspects, whether it's, conspiracy, the paranormal, UFOs, the spiritual aspect, all these ties into consciousness and how we evolve. And it's by thinking outside the box that we've put ourselves in. So in saying that, a lot of these groups that I'm aware of and have interacted with around the world, they don't want to go past what's behind the crafts, what's in the crafts. When I talk about some of the crafts being structured out of what I call living light, or when I'm taking the geometric light realms, even, the crafts having a symbiotic relationship, they don't want to go there. They want to keep it unknown. They want to keep it about the, what could it be? It's like they don't want the answer for what it is, and they want to just keep spinning the same cycle. And this is where, within the UFO community, it's not going to evolve past the word UFO, because they don't want it to go past the word UFO. They want to keep it unknown. They want it controlled, and there's a lot of organisations out there that are being controlled, whether they realise it or not. And so people like James and I, we're getting the contact that we're getting because we come from the heart and because we come from the conscious aspect. And it's not an ego thing. It's just telling the fact as it is, because as soon as people come to the ranch and they experience what's going on here with James, or whether they see what's going on with myself, they end up taking contact with them. I believe everyone on the planet is an experiencer, but they need to get their mind chatter out for long enough to observe thoughts and ideas coming in, which are usually from their guides or the beings they work with. So, it sounds far out to some people out there, and I understand that, but it comes down to the conscious aspect, and that's where a lot of people don't want to go.
Well, you said before 3D. So what you're talking about is we're not talking about 3D. So a higher consciousness has to bring us out of 3D. And you have a picture of this lion being behind you, James and Peter. James, could you tell us about that picture that you have there?
Well, what's interesting with the feline beings is that they've been, replete throughout history. India, they talk about them. The Egyptians talk about them. It's an ongoing thing. And the lion beings are known as the protectors of the gods. And so they show these lion beings, and they're, protecting Lakshmi and a lot of the Indian gods. Sekhmet was protecting the temples. And they're walking right alongside the ancient Anunnaki. And so they're returning actually with the benevolent Anunnaki. And a lot of people have a misunderstanding about what Anunnaki means, which means those who came from heaven to earth, basically. So there's a lot of different types of Anunnaki that people want to categorize. But back in the day, like thousands of years ago, there was a being by the name of Marduk, and he was an ancient Lyrian Anunnaki, and he came from that sector, came here, and he was part of the Enki Enlil clan, doing their thing. And he kind of went rogue, and he aligned himself with the reptilians and other baser entities and wanted total supremacy over the earth. And, the dinar has his face on it. I mean, Marduk on the dinar. So basically, that's kind of where that originated. They fell out of universal law, and the protectors and the other beings left. The benevolent Anunnaki left. And after they left, they continued with turf wars and all this other nonsense. So we're still dealing today with the draconian empire, basically, or draconian law, with the Anunnaki fallen Anunnaki at the top of that, basically, and then you've got reptilians, some low-level grays, and a lot of other entities, that serpent beings and things like that, which a lot of us would call archons, are all in the mix, and they've been suppressing humanity for years. And the good news is these lion beings are coming in to put an end to that suppression, and the Orion Council of Light is coming in for planetary liberation. The Pleiadians, the Arcturians, all of them are helping us out, but they're not going to do everything for us. We got to do our part, you know. But they're here as cheerleaders, and they do assist in clearing out a lot of the unseen negative entities and energies.
Yeah, I mean, on a certain energetic level, I do feel like the battle is not entirely ours. I mean, we have to do our part, but but Winston knows this too. Winston, you've had your experiences with the lion beings and serpentines.
Yeah. James said that the lions are known as the protectors of the gods. Let me just add that they're also the protectors of the hillbillies, especially the Grand Master.
You said in ancient order.
On two separate occasions, they have actually physically intervened on my behalf. That one little time that little gray guy showed up, I mean, they made him into powder. I'm sure they did. And then, because the next day, man, them black helicopters buzzing like crazy over the house looking for it, but it was gone. And then last March, I had an episode, black magicians and all that kind of. So they came in and physically intervened on my behalf. So I don't go to bed at night without what I thank them for what they've done for me so far, hoping that they're still watching.
But I do, like I said, I feel like this battle, the more that you go back through history, and I really trying to get the, trying to get the facts of history is not easy. I find, it's very obviously confusing for many reasons. They didn't want us figuring it out. I mean, it's time to change on this planet. There's no question that even you can see the ancient Chinese elders and that they're trying to push forth a change. Is this going to be Cabal 2.0 though, James, do you think?
Well, they're kind of imploding on themselves right now. So the deal is, it's very simple. It's like higher consciousness and energy in, garbage out.
I don't know if you can come closer to the computer. Sorry about that. We're just having, there you go. So
basically what it is that the higher consciousness and energy is coming in. It's a natural cycle. The Earth is moving through a highly energized place in space, and all the planets are going through this change and atmospheric change and things like that. But it's people who are not frequency specific. These shifts and these energy shifts aren't going to be here, and that's their problem. It's like they're imploding. Their karma is bending back in on themselves, being accelerated, and basically that's, this is so big. It's far beyond any of us here. But you can't. You either get with the program or you implode. Basically, your whole kingdom is going to implode on you.
I'm trying to adjust, just so our viewers understand. I'm trying to adjust. There's major anomalies in the volume in this video, so we can't help that. We don't know what's causing it, but we're just going to do the best we can to deal with it. Because sometimes, all of a sudden, James will just be really loud, and then he'll be really soft, or Peter, and it's like we can't control this. Somebody's in there, James. We got to get to the bottom of that. You've got.
Yeah, they just did that to another one, another Skype. Zoom call actually I had earlier, where I was talking with some really high-powered people about the changes and what's going on, and they just locked down my sound altogether. And so we brought a whole new computer in, and now the only way we can keep the sound up is to hold our finger on the on the input volume, because it keeps going down to zero by itself.
Is this Flintstone style or what? But hey, if it works, right? You're gonna overcome. We've got to improvise and overcome. Well, look, I mean, I think though we saw President Eisenhower warn us about military-industrial complex. We know President Eisenhower. It's not a hidden fact that he had meetings with some kind of extraterrestrials, right, or non-natives of the planet. And we also know that we know Roswell really happened. They've really got to start, revealing this and really having an open discussion about it. We know that the Pope, in fact, I published a research paper talking about how, well, let's see, the Pope had said that he would baptize aliens if they were to arrive. We had, during the campaign, in fact, we had the presidential campaign, we had Hillary Clinton coming out saying she would tell the truth about UFOs if she was elected. How quick that really went into our long-term memory or our past memory. Most people forgot about that, or at least the mainstream media, conveniently. But we've had UNICEF do a special, I guess you would say, public service announcement campaign regarding differences and accepting differences in people who look, who are aliens. It's really, there's been much public many things that were made public about getting, seeding our consciousness with the idea of ETs, UFOs, and whatever. But the problem I think Eisenhower had was he found he really couldn't trust them. And I'm saying, my question to you, we know that we have a treaty with Antarctica, which is highly suspect in my opinion. When you look at the worlds who can't agree on trade, can't agree on human rights, can't agree on currency, can't agree on foreign policy, and suddenly everybody agrees not to go to Antarctica, something's up. So maybe you can, I think ultimately we need to have some kind of treaty before we really start interacting with these beings in the physical. What do you think about that?
Well, let me respond to your comment about Hillary and her disclosure of UFOs. The only thing that Hillary could ever disclose was the reptilians.
Now, why, Winston, would you like to explain that?
That's all she had any information about, because she was one of them.
Okay.
She's not going to disclose what James shows even on his videos and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
She did not have that. The only experience that she had was extraterrestrial life or UFO. It was reptilian. That was the only thing she was going to bring out. So people shouldn't be all excited about Hillary all of a sudden giving disclosure. She's only going to disclose the dark side.
Right, but it's about the fact that it was revealed and discussed. And even Podesta, John Podesta said this when...
Same thing.
I know, but what I'm saying is that the idea of it has been talked about in the press, and you see that it's totally suppressed, and it's still taboo, James. James, let me ask... Okay, go ahead, James, yeah.
Well, here's the thing about that. That's why we made the movie The Uncontrolled Narrative, because the benevolent beings are not getting they're not getting any time on the pulpit there, or airtime or anything else. They're keeping this all in fear, nuts and bolts, in the past. 60 years, Roswell, yada yada, government, they saw a ship, a jet chased it. They aren't covering who these beings are, or were they our ancient ancestors, or they're covering nothing about what, do they have free energy? Do they have incredible healing technology? Why aren't they covering any of this stuff? They've already got a lot of that technology, and they're not about it, and it's all about power struggles and things like that. But anyway, we go back to the same thing. Even the UFO community is highly infiltrated by basically some great reptilian hybrids. I see them stand behind people all the time. And they show me a picture. They go, look at my beings. Look who I contacted. I got contacted by these beings. And I said, you better check yourself for probes, because those aren't the good guys.
Wow.
They're not the ones you want to be contacted. And it's in ignorance they're doing the work of these beings, And there's one guy in there, I won't mention his name, but he's at the top of the food chain in the UFO community. And he does pujas to Shani. Well, Shani's a demon god, and it's attached to Saturn and Luciferian stuff and things like that. Well, you look at that and you go, Shani, why are you doing pujas to Shani? I mean, that makes no sense at all until you look at what's standing behind them. And when you see what's standing behind them, it all makes sense. So a lot of people in air are going to these events and going to these trainings, and they have no idea. There's no discernment, and they're not even discerning the behavior of the person putting on the training. There's no discernment about his past, what he's really up to, where the money goes, nothing. They do no research. All they do is they know it's a famous name, and so I'm going to go there. Mm-hmm. And, and then they're paying, what, $2,500 now to go to a Skywatch event and see a plane usually, maybe a ship, the ships are there anyway. You don't have to spend $2,500. Just go out on a clear sky night and get out of the light pollution. You're going to see ships. They're everywhere.
Right. So, Peter, what do you think about this? We have this treaty, and do you think it's a good idea to have some sort of ground rules for contact? Because I mean, just for the obvious reason that we're really coming from. We're not even totally emerging yet, but we're trying to emerge out of this lower density consciousness, this duality consciousness. I mean, there's a lot of people on the planet, they're sick and tired of the war. We're sick and tired of having these narratives of, racial diversity, I'm not diversity, racism rather, having that like shoved down into our minds just because it's a narrative that the mainstream media is pushing. Personally, I don't feel those vibrations. I don't feel racism within me. I'm not racist personally, so it seemed like it just kind of emerged out of this agenda, out of social engineering. I think we're all pretty sick of it, and I think at this point, whatever steps that we need to take to start moving and evolving. I mean, because that's really what it's about. It's about the human race evolving. So when I say the human race, I'm talking black, white, yellow, red, because we are the human race. So we have to collectively do this. We have to be cautious because, we have these oligarchs who are trying to push a new world order agenda, which is not, I think, in humanity's best interest from what I've studied and what I've read as a researcher. But we should be able to unite as a race, the human race, and be able to evolve beyond this. It's just getting so old, isn't it?
Well,
Whoever wants to address that.
That's the reptilian agenda, is to divide and conquer. They create the problem for the solution that they wanted, like the problem, solution, action, like all reaction. So you hear David Icke talk about this, but they're creating the situation for the outcome that they want to get the go-ahead from the people to do it. That's the reptilian agenda. Mm-hmm. And so, look, that's how they're rolling with all this and making it all happen, is through divide and conquer. Now, there is chances they're going to try and push a racial war on America especially. There is a chance they're going to try and push a civil war. Again, you want to divide the people. But the beings have showed me that this has already started this shift in consciousness, that it's not going to happen how most people can perceive, and that it will take some years after the awakening process of humanity knowing that there's brothers and sisters and family out there. It will take a slow progress, but it will excel exponentially once it gets to a point where there'll be contact on a civilization level. Now, protocols, I think a lot of that is got to do with what you align yourself with. So if you align yourself with beings that are all about the awakening healing process, not of just humanity, but also the evolution of the universe, it passes a lot of what we need to turn in terms of a mandate for contact out the window, because it's all got to do with your level of consciousness. So you won't have access to these high levels of technology unless you've got the level of consciousness to use it. Now, the really advanced beings, they don't even have a craft. They break down to one electron, which is a negative charged subatomic particle, and they remanifest another electron anywhere in space and time, because everything's got a symbiotic relationship. So through our consciousness, we've got access to this sort of conscious technology, but you need the level of consciousness to access it. So look, it's up to us, the people, but they're there helping us and guiding us. But at the same time, there is a war going on. It's a spiritual war, and this is where finances, education, equality, poverty, and spirituality, science and technology, all these things will be like changed overnight once the truth comes out. But it comes down to what you align yourself with. And at the moment, many have aligned themselves unwillingly to the Archon reptilian agenda because they're looking external for these answers. When you start to go internal, that's when you start to connect with the guides and the beings that you work with and your higher self, and that's where you can surpass any external force. And that's the problem we're facing right now.
And you're saying unwittingly too, though. I mean, when you say aligning with the reptilian agenda and looking external, we're talking about religion too. I mean, this is part of it, right?
Yeah, well, they all want it external.
Well, here's the thing, and this is going to upset a lot of people, but basically the bottom line is every bearded god, almost every religion on this planet had a bearded god. And they all, they worshiped these bearded gods. And the bearded gods were the Anunnaki. They were ancient Lyrians that came here. And basically, it all depends on how that god interacted with humanity. And some were all loving and all forgiving, and some were jealous, wrathful, genocidal maniacs. And so we have that in our history. It's a schizophrenic image of what God is. I mean, who created them? There's a force outside of that created them as well, that created everything. It's within all creation. So it's the one consciousness that encompasses all consciousness and all planes and dimensions throughout the multiverse. And that's really the closest description I can give to the source on what it is. But unfortunately, and also too, that resides within the individual. So we access that through our soul, which sits next to our heart, and the soul's connected to the source. And that's why they say drop into the heart and make your own personal connection with source there. And so unfortunately, a lot of these religions are go-betweens, and they're pushing programs that are very ancient. A lot of them are just history, things that happen in history. And we know, basically we know what universal law is. It's very simple. It's universal peace, brother, sisterly love, individual freedom, and prosperity for everybody. It's called unity consciousness. And that's universal law. That's where we're going right now. And everything that doesn't align with that has fallen away. And unfortunately, a lot of the religions, they really push fear, guilt, and unworthiness, and a God separate from you outside somewhere that you have to worship. And that's all very disempowering. And that wasn't, not even Jesus said to do that. He told everybody the temple was within. Ye are all gods, children of the Most High. He said over and over again, he said that ye are all gods. What he means is that you have access to that same consciousness that he did, and he activated it, he expanded with it, and he walked it, and he's showing us how to do it, But we forget that part because we're still worshiping external gods and living in fear, guilt, and unworthiness, and those all separate us from making our own personal connections. So we have to get away from the old program and realize that is a driven program. But I mean, that is going to upset a lot of religions when they find out the truth of their ancient history.
True, and let me just screen share this image here, which is who you're talking about. This is as well. It says here this is an Anunnaki who was in stasis. This was an image, and if you look at the pictures, boy, they match pretty closely. I mean, this is a pretty good. I would say you can draw the conclusion that this is an Anunnaki in stasis. I'm sorry for the quality of the image, but I'm trying to find a better one, and it escapes me. But when you look at all of these, look at these ancient, look at these pictures. These are not, human looking, and they are, maybe reptoid looking. And of course you talked about, the religion, and we have a big problem. I mean, here, this is Homo capensis. These are the large skulls here who are in the Vatican, supposedly, or were these part of the Egyptians? They were in Egypt.
Yeah,
and
the Egyptian gods, the Greek gods, the Egyptian gods, all the ancient gods all came from this group, and then they had hybrids and things on down the road.
Mm-hmm.
The whole Egyptian dynasty goes back to these guys. So, and they were here before that. They were here over 450,000 years ago.
Right, and we can even see, archaeological digs, and we know the Smithsonian has done a lot to try to destroy these and hide this true history from us, and knowing who and what we truly are, because as Jesus said, the kingdom of heaven is within. But this looks like one of the Anunnaki craft. Can you guys confirm, or from your knowledge, is this right?
Where's that?
This is by the sun, and it's labeled as an Anunnaki craft. Yeah.
What they did was, and I also want to do a little disclaimer. I've had the benevolent Anunnaki appear to me, and they are beautiful beings. They're about 8 feet tall plus. They're very beautiful beings. They're extremely loving, extremely very powerful, enlightened, and so. There's a big difference between the reptilians and the Anunnaki. People are putting those two together, and they really shouldn't. The fallen Anunnaki did make a pact with the reptilians in the ancient history, And that's where the big confusion came from. And there are fallen Anunnaki, but the fallen Anunnaki are having to stand before the councils now of the benevolent ones and explain to them why they broke universal law and how are they going to fix this, you know? And so they have a choice. They either basically get recycled or straighten out the mess they created.
Let's take a look at this video and see if we can go a little bit bigger on this, just to get, this is a videotape of this being that was discovered. I don't know exactly where it was discovered.
Yeah, I put that one out on.
Yeah, this you know, in stasis. It looks like it's a stasis chamber, and I mean, just look at the skin on this guy. This guy is in very good condition for being probably quite old, and his beard is just like a hair quality, not really a beard quality. It's a very different quality hair. Very interesting. I heard this guy woke up through the ancient, through the Asian elders. I heard that this was through my contacts that this person did wake up and they're being held like against their will, so to speak. But we'll see. They have these, you know, covered in gold, all kinds of gold. And I'm just going to play this a little bit on mute. And if you want to talk about what you know about this, James, or anybody, just go right ahead, because this is what we're talking about.
Yeah, from my understanding is that they are on hold. They have these guys and they're afraid of them basically because they don't know what kind of powers or abilities they have. And I feel they're benevolent. I don't think there's a problem with that. But I know we need to start working with the council, the higher councils that are here, you know, and you know, just work with this very spiritually advanced ones, because they're going to empower you as an individual. They're going to help you make your own connection. They don't want to be worshipped. They don't want you to fall. They don't want your gold. That's out of the story. They're here for a whole different purpose. So there's a song I wrote which is quite interesting. That it's called Anunnaki Return. Have you heard that?
No, I haven't. I didn't know about that.
Way up on the charts over in Australia, but I wrote this song. It was just channeled. It came through to me, and I did the Outback Gypsies, and they played it. And if you go to Outback Gypsy, or cdbaby.au and type in Outback Gypsy, it's Anunnaki Return, and that song is so powerful, and it talks about who they really are and why they're here and why they've returned. But I've never written a song before, and I wrote it in perfect verse, everything, and I hand it to them. They go, "I've never seen that happen before," you know. So
yeah, I never knew you wrote music, James. That was news to me. You didn't either. So, what do you think, fellas? I mean, what do you think that, you know? Maybe we'll start with, you know, I'll ask Winston, because Winston, what do we need to do? I think, what kind of treaty do you think we should have? What kind of ground rules should we have with interacting with them?
No, the only reason that treaties are ever written is so some party can break them.
Exactly.
So you don't write treaties. You adhere, like James said, to universal law. You don't write treaties with anybody.
Okay, well, we don't know what universal law is.
James just told you what it was.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
Repeat that, James.
You can repeat it for our viewers.
You know, basically what it is, it's universal peace, brother, sisterly love, individual freedom and prosperity for everyone. And we need to just behave as if, you know, the creator, you know, just love the creator within all creation, you know, behave as if all life matters. It's like the Native Americans know about this. They live by it, you know, and so it's really basic. It's all about coming from the heart and being in service. And all this lack and all these problems we're having, and the division problems and fear and such, all that stuff is created by the controllers. And the controllers have multi dimensions to them. It's not just physical controllers like the Illuminati and the banksters and people like that. They're actually being controlled by unseen forces too. So the problems are coming from them. You know, if we were left alone as a society, we probably would have evolved a lot further than we are right now. And I tell people, The reason why there's so much inhumanity on the planet right now is because of non-human influence. And it's the only thing that makes sense.
Yeah. Let me ask Peter. Peter, what do you think about the people who say that humanity allowed this to happen to us? How do you respond to that? Because there's people who believe that. I'm not saying that I do. In fact, I don't. But just to be on the record clear about that, yeah.
In a way, once we realise the power that we've got, then we could probably say yes to that. But people unknowingly don't understand the extent of what's going on. So if you're aware of it and you can do something about it, well, then you've got some responsibility in it. That's why we're aware of the power that we've got, and people like all of us here are doing what we can because we've got some awareness.
Right.
But what's going on is that there is a darker force behind this. Now, it does go back to Lyra, but it goes back even before Lyra outside of it. What they've shown me is that there was the fallen Anunnaki. When they first manifested into this reality, it was from the Elohim state. And then they came into Lyra. From there, at that time, there was reptilians, and behind them is a darker force, which we could call the Archons, but they were actually the fallen Elohim from other states of existence. And it's almost like if you're robbing a bank, the best way to rob a bank is to do it so you don't get caught, so you're behind the setup of it and get somebody else to do it for you. So in some way, the reptilians, they're like the foot soldiers of a darker force of what's been happening. And so what they showed me was that these fallen Elohim, which were the Anunnaki later on, they created a artificial intelligence throughout not just this galaxy but other galaxies. And the reptilians and other types of parasitic thought forms and other beings, they're like the foot soldiers of it to basically try and control humanity, and especially humans on Earth, because we're a mixture of many beings. We can do things that even the advanced beings can't do, but we're not aware of that at the moment. So there is a darker force behind all this. It sounds far out there, but I've seen it, I've experienced it, I've dealt with it. And the human race, it's like, just play your part, do your part. If you would give the shirt off your back to help a fellow human being, you don't need to do much more than that, than just be a good person. Some people have incarnated here to do more, but they have shown me that people like us are like the antivirus to the virus throughout the galaxies, not just this galaxy, but other galaxies throughout the universe, to help control and bring control back and flip that over so we've got self-control. But at the moment, there's a war going on and we're in the midst of it.
Antivirus to the virus. That's well said. Winston, did you have any comments to make about this?
No, that was very well put. Very well put. I couldn't add anything to that.
I just think that there's people who, when it comes to universal law, it seems natural to us, but not to everybody. So for people who it doesn't seem natural to people who are in the dogma of religion, I think they're getting their wake-up call with what's happening within the Catholic Church. And they're starting to really realize there's not that many priests who are who actually don't molest children. So I'm sorry, it's absolutely disgraceful. And, there's lots of reports coming out that the Pope was aware of not just, sexual abuse against children, immoral behavior, and he still appointed these people into his I would say cabinet or positions of management and authority. This is I would have to say at this point they're morally bankrupt in my opinion, because they really don't have a moral high ground to stand on here at this point. I think this is the beginning of the end of some of these religions, and I don't know how on earth they're going to reconcile this. I don't know. I haven't really gone out and taken a poll on Catholics to find out, how they feel about it. And I'm not insulting Catholics. I was raised Catholic myself. But, there's no question that I cannot subscribe and I cannot forgive these people. It's really an open season on, for priests. It's just an open season for pedophilia, and they all are above the law, which is a problem. So these are problems we're not going to solve, you and I, in this conversation, but this is, I think, the beginning of the breakdown of these structures that are preventing us from embracing these concepts that we're talking about. Because if religion, if they have to have that middleman between them and God, then they're starting to realize, I think they're starting to see that this kind of middleman is not the kind that, that not only do you not need it, but there's something inherently wrong with what's going on with
Yeah, let me weigh in on this just a little bit for clarification. And first off, what you're speaking of is the Roman Catholic Church. There are 7 Catholic churches on the planet, and the one we're having the problem with is the Roman version of Catholicism. So I want to make that clarification.
Well, it isn't only Catholicism. We
Oh yeah, you're right.
We have seen, I'm sorry, but we're seeing, egregious, horrific, moral, just complete immoral behavior. How do you justify beating your wife in Islam? How do you justify, there's rabbis that are doing this. It's not just, and I'm not trying to just pick on Catholics, but that's what's in the news lately more than anything else. We have to stop turning the cheek and look the other way, because this is what they're afraid of, James. This is why we're not getting it faster. If we're not having this, I guess, contact faster, is because even just the disclosure of what's happening within the government itself, with the deep state, with the crimes that were committed during the campaign, the treason that was within our government, which we had this after Project Paperclip, this coup d'état within our government of these German scientists, and not only the scientists, but then of course that opened the door for Israel to come in. So the problem with this is that we have we are really in until they show how corrupt the government can be, we can't really go to the next level and have like disclosure on even 9/11 or disclosure about these other a little bit more bigger problems that were thrust on us, these false flags or whatever you want to call them. So do you understand what I'm saying? So it's like we have to first, I think what Trump is trying to do is I think Trump wants to bring out some of this new technology. There was someone I interviewed recently who said that we weren't ready for it because we couldn't handle this advanced technology, these advanced, for crafts and for healing and things like that. Because look what we did when we had it. And I beg to differ, because I said, well, we didn't have it. The government had it. Look what the government did with it, with the A-bomb and the technology that they got. They didn't do anything good for humanity with it. Humanity didn't get this technology. So this is the fundamental problem. I think that we have this very old traditional, dogma that it may be the majority of people on the planet who, I guess what they're trying to do is they're trying to avoid any kind of crazy, rioting and chaos. So they have to unfold this very slowly. I know when we had Randy Kramer on, Randy talked about that there was somebody talking about like 100-year disclosure plan. Do you know, James, what is the plan for disclosure? Is the government made this official? I know in this program that you created, you and what's his name, Jimmy Church were talking about something happened last December. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, basically what's going on is that the divine feminine is coming in with a bat, you might say, and it's coming in very strongly. But there's a problem with that too. One of the problems with that divine feminine energy is that it's accelerating things and it's creating a healing. And sometimes the pendulum goes too far, and then you get into the feminist movement and things like that. And now you're back to separation and division and a lot of anger and frustration and unhealed trauma. And so we need to get really clearly about what is the divine feminine. It's loving, nurturing. Grandmothers and mothers don't send their kids to war. They love nature. They love the earth. They don't really participate in all this warlike behavior and all the againstness and separation. But, you know, we do need to give it a voice. But where are you coming from in your voice? Are you coming from your wounds? You know, who's talking? You know, are you speaking from your wounds and traumas and your unhealed issues out there? And what are you spreading? More division, more hatred, more. And so we need to get really clear about the come from, you know, where are we coming from when we're doing this? And I've seen that a lot where it's just gone overboard and there's no personal responsibility for the event and what happened in that event. And you know, victims try to gain emotional and financial support playing that role. Saviors, they need to save so they can feel good about themselves. And persecutors are just wounded people that are trying to get their power back, you know? And so you can get on that wheel and just keep spinning on that hamster wheel, or you can take personal responsibility and step off of it. And that's what the Divine Feminine is coming in right now, really strong. And we really need to really get a good hold on what that is, what that represents. And you know, I've been supporting, you know, women's empowerment and things like that all my life. And here at the ranch, we have a lot of women nobody even heard of before that were pushed out of the UFO field that, you know, I make sure they have a voice here. But I've seen over and over again that it's we're getting out of hand. And when we go too far off the pendulum, we're back in their world again. You know,
let me comment on this divine feminine concept, because it has more to do with balance.
Exactly.
We have been overbalanced with masculinity for 12,000 years. And so that balance, to be corrected, you have to bring in the feminine aspect. Now, this doesn't apply only to women. This applies to men, because men have to have a balance between the masculine and the feminine, and the females, they have to have that very same balance. So it's not just about women particularly, it's about all of us.
All right, I'm going to go and screen share a little bit more of this, talking about, this is a perfect time to screen share this segment here. And maybe James can tell us, well, after she's done talking, do you want to tell us who this is in the video?
Okay. Her name's Kinsey. And she's,
Can't hear you. Oh, no.
Her name's Kinsey, and she's one of the people that come here on a regular basis.
Okay.
Been going to Contact in the Desert, and she volunteers there.
Okay.
And I know her there, and she came up to see for herself, and so we brought her on just to talk about, you know, from the feminine side and what she experienced here and things of that nature. But it proves without a shadow of a doubt that we have thousands and thousands of people that have been present,
Mm-hmm.
and we told them exactly when and where the ships would come in. And we've done this on a regular basis. And I've done it with Paranormal State. I've done it with, you know, even Fox News. I've done it with everybody. And at what point everybody's going, when are we going to have contact? And I go, we've been having contact here for over 30 years. And it's
Exactly.
been proven redundantly. And, you know, the whole planet's had contact since its inception. There's been beings coming and going. And it's replete throughout history. So that we need to stop asking that question and putting it out in the future somewhere, and giving it all the power to the government to tell us when contact's happening, because are going to happen. You know, when they say contact's going to happen 20 years in the future, I go, are you serious? It's happening now.
Right.
Well, go out and watch the skies, and then tune into these ships that are up there if you want to have a contact.
Yeah.
And also too, we are a series of colonizations on this planet from different star nations, and we are the ETs we've been looking for. Basically, it's genetically proven. You know, just all you need, if you want to see an ET, you know, walk in the bathroom, turn the light on, look in the mirror. You know, so we need to stop sensationalizing all this stuff and keep it so far away. A lot of it's us.
True.
It's us returning.
I think, James, you should be the ambassador for humans on the planet. I think you'd be a really great ambassador. What do you think, Winston? What do you think, Peter? I think I'm voting for James to be our ambassador. Okay, let's hear what she has to say a little bit, and then we're going to look at some ships. Maybe James and Peter can explain what we see after she talks a little bit.
Started shooting lasers at the sky, and everyone started gasping. And he goes, "Kinsey, check the time." I look at my phone, and sure enough, it is 9:51, and a huge ship flies over and powers up, giving everybody a wonderful show. And it was an amazing experience that completely took my breath away, because it's one thing to see them, but it's another thing that they're communicating with him and telling him when to watch and when to look. So this whole place is just magic, and being here has been the most incredible experience, and I'd never want to leave.
Look at this guy. Check him out. I got him. I got him. I got him. Check him out, man. He's going. You should see the field around this guy.
Wow.
You're experiencing a lot of the same things that we're experiencing as far as censorship and being cut out of the loop. And I've seen your footage, the photographs of the platings actually appearing in your living room.
Yeah, I'm going to hold it right there. And this is interesting. I wanted to show this also to our viewers. Peter, do you want to explain to us where this is and what were the circumstances under this?
This is just while having dinner in East Melbourne. At the time, I was with my now ex-wife and her family, and we were just outside having a barbecue, having dinner. And I've just pointed up and said, "What's that?" And there was 13 of us that witnessed this flying saucer for probably about 6 minutes on and off, flying around the area until it imploded on itself. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's sort of the circumstances. And this is a Pleiadian called Shiji that I've communicated with. It appears in apparition form sometimes as well, but sometimes she's physical. That photo was actually under circumstances where she had landed her craft in my bedroom, and it was overlapping our reality. So if you can imagine two vibrations overlapping, and she's starting to come in. And then I actually walked outside and filmed the craft right above the house.
Wow.
So, James actually stayed in that room for 3 months and had a lot of experiences in the house as well when he lived with us in Australia for some time. So, yeah, that's just a little bit anyway.
Yeah, no, that's very, very interesting. And so, yeah, she was talking about in this movie that that you know exactly what time they're going to come by and power up now, James. It seems to be, wow, it's amazing. Like, I didn't hear that before, that you could really actually predict it.
Well, there's constant communication going on. When you reach a certain level, I always tell people contact comes with enlightenment. So if you're doing your spiritual practices, you know, the near-death experiences, and I've studied with lamas and yogis and been initiated and elders from all different nations, and you know, you stay on that path, eventually you're going to figure it out. And when you look in all the ancient scriptures, it's replete throughout the scriptures of intervention. So it just basically comes with you know, the meditation, the healing practices we do here, process-oriented therapies. Eventually, you're going to rise the occasion, and you're going to have your own contact. And so, I've had this all my life. Even as a kid, I had these contacts, and so, you know, I forgot about it. I got all caught up in social consciousness and school and everything else, and put it on the back burner. But then I had the near-death experience, and it opened everything back up again. But we're in constant, both Peter and I are in constant communication with them.
Social consciousness, that's an interesting way to put it. I mean, you're right, because if you're in social consciousness, you're kind of anchored here onto the planet in a way that I think kind of cuts you off from that higher consciousness, the universal consciousness, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like most humanity down here believe they're a personality in a body. Yeah. And they're governed through the first three chakras, which are survival, sex, and power. And so the whole TV industry, the movie industry, all that stuff works on those first three chakras, basically. When you get out of there and you get into the heart and the other higher chakras above that, that's when you start figuring things out, and you realize you're not just a body and a personality. You have a body and a personality, but you're a spirit, and that spirit is multidimensional. And so when you start getting out of the personality, out of the body, get beyond that, transcend that, you start realizing that the whole universe is full of life, and not just this dimension. There's life on all the other dimensions. The scientists know there's at least 11 that they admit to, and they're bigger than this dimension. There's more life on them than this dimension. So you know, when we want to stick to nuts and bolts, and you know, and just hang out in social consciousness, that's great, but I find it extremely boring and limited. And and they always try to put me in their little box.
Well, that's the problem, is that it's very hard to exist here. Is that the challenge? Is that what we're supposed to do? We're supposed to be able to find our way back to universal consciousness.
Exactly. Yeah. Basically, that's the game. And with all this new energy, this shift that's happening, that's what that's all about. It's changing our DNA. The cosmic rays are off the scale right now. The Schumann resonance went from 7.8 to like 1,000 over last Easter, and it's all over the place. And so the whole electromagnetic bandwidth has increased, and the Earth is just getting bombarded, with these new energies, and it's changing everybody all the way down to the level of DNA, which is not fixed, by the way. DNA is just they've proven that now, that DNA actually has a spiritual component to it. So right now, so you really think about it, if DNA is just a code, who wrote the code? And whoever wrote that code can rewrite that code and change reality. And that's your higher dimensional self, has the ability to rewrite that code.
Well, let me just change direction for just a minute. What we know, you probably heard last week that the solar observatory in New Mexico had been closed down, and I'm just wondering if you happen to know anything that happened, because it looks like they're of course, Cobra had a message on his board that there was an invasion of some kind, L1 domain invasion started, and that was on September 9th. Or 10th, but I think it was the 9th. At this time, there were people taking pictures up in the sky. Some may or may not be actual images of the sun or a craft or whatever. But there seemed to have been a lot of other indicators that something's really going on up there right now. We're having this chemtrailing, I think, has many reasons, but I think it's obscuring what's also going on out there. I think we have a large planetary body in our solar system that's very close to us, that may be affecting the ecosystems on the planet. We're seeing huge lakes of bodies of water disappearing. And like, the mainstream media is not talking about this. Nothing to see here. We have, Dutch Sense, who is, as you know, an independent scientist who talks about seismology across the planet, and talks about the idea that not only are earthquakes predictable, but much like a pebble in the water, that their energy spreads, and that when there is a reaction, when there is an action in one, when there's an event, earthquake in one spot, there's a reaction in another, because they ripple. The energy has to ripple and go somewhere. And he's recently been asked not to discuss that. I think someone from New Zealand, the authorities from New Zealand, have had some disputes with him about his science, or maybe just the revelation of his science. So what can you tell us about that, James? And then after that, I wanted to ask Peter about what's going on with Pine Gap, and is that involved in this, and how do people down in Australia view what you're doing? So I'll ask you that after I could get James to respond to that.
Okay, so there's been, for quite some time now, there's been massive objects coming through this solar system. And that's happened on a regular basis right now. I mean, things bigger than Jupiter have been whizzing through. You don't hear about it. Nobody's going to be talking about it. So we've had a lot of, it also ties into that highly energized place in the solar system we're moving into. So there are massive ships that are coming in right now. They're parked, a lot of them are parked behind the moon or behind the sun. And they're seeing those. There's so much activity going on up there. Now, the closures, there's several things that could have happened there. Now, I've heard two different stories. One, I heard it had to do with China hacking into our whole system there. And there's something called Operation Hammer, and another operation going on there. I sent you the video on that. And Clyde Lewis was talking about that. And I think there's a lot more to the story, because there actually was a hiker found dead, near the observatory, which is kind of interesting. And why would they come in with all the FBI and everybody else and lock it down? And they were saying there was some kind of a threat. And my gut feeling tells me it might be multiple things, but I really think it's all about whoever's watching the sun is seeing these events unfolding and seeing things going between us and the sun. And they're also seeing massive ships up there and also a lot of smaller ships as well. So it's happening now. That the real disclosure is going to come from the heavens. It's not going to come from the governments. And, I love what Mary says. She said that universal peace will not come through governments and religions, but through the hearts and minds of the people. Well, it's the same thing with disclosure. Disclosure is going to come through the hearts and minds of the people, and the people that have the open heart, open mind, loving heart, pure intention. Those are the ones that are going to really experience disclosure. And those who want it to happen, that are seeking this out and doing research, are the ones that are going to have the disclosure. So, disclosure, the higher dimensional beings are not going to trespass. And so the low level ones will, and that's the problem. But there is a massive cleanup, and a lot of these ships coming in are part of that cleanup going on. So planetary Earth is going to be reset. It's going to go back to Eden, which was its original intention. I just use Eden as a mindset. But it was designed, basic Atlantis and Lemuria were colonies that were part of the Star Nations. They were started by the Palladians, and they were developed. They were a place where they were terraforming, and the original intent was where everything could evolve to its highest potential, and it was hijacked. And so now the hijackers are being taken care of. It's getting reset. And there's beings that went through the Orion Wars, like the Orion Council of Light and people like that, are all coming here now as part of the planetary liberation process. And so all that's happening in space right now, and it's happening in the other dimensions as well. If they all decide to decloak, we're going to have no parking space, so in space, there's that going on. So, pretty soon, I think the real disclosure is just going to come. It's been happening for a long time. They've been flying over major cities. They've been flying over all places and showing themselves. So it's just going to escalate, and pretty soon there'll just be the mass decloak, and then people are just going to have to deal with it.
Well, thanks, James. No, I definitely see you as our ambassador, Earth ambassador, James Gilliland. No, I can see it. I see it right. It's written right there. I can see it. I'm manifesting it. Okay, it's intention, right? So let me ask Peter about what's going on down in Australia and what are people, are there a lot of people awake? Are there a lot of people who, can you have a general conversation about UFOs or what's going on at Pine Gap or what you see outside your window?
I'd say that the Australian people are really health conscious. For example, you can get food with GMO in it, but a lot of the time it ain't got GMOs. So even just with people, what they eat spiritually, exercise-wise, people are very open to all this, and especially on the East Coast, which is where a large percentage of the population is. UFOs is just something that, if you sort of don't believe in it, you're sort of out of the loop on things. So with that side of things, people are open to it. Australia's a really health conscious and conscious place in general. Now, the media, on the other hand, they've been taking it a little bit more serious. I know that they sort of paid me out. I've been on morning news, evening news, on shows there. And, eventually it's got to the point now where I've been shunned by the media there, and also I'd say the UFO community. But, I've been flown to Italy to do TV, done TV for Japanese TV, Mexican, and it seems that a lot of the world, this is sort of old hat. They're sort of like, yeah, what, so UFOs are real, where from that? So, but with Pine Gap, like anything, if you're aware of the installation, you're allowed to know about the installation, and it's an old hat. So I do know from insiders that a lot of the drones that are active for military use for the US and Australia, they're either flown out of Pine Gap in the middle, for the Middle East especially, or they're flown out of the Catalina Islands or island off Los Angeles. It usually goes in 12-hour shifts with multiple pilots flying the drones remotely. So there has been information I've also received, just like other people, about underground installations there, which I believe link up with Parliament House in Canberra and other spots as well. also with the US network going back to America here and other installations. But there is now new marine bases in the Northern Territory up the top part of Australia. But there is a few other spots where there are alien bases, and I believe a joint ET and I'd say US base, even though it's in Australia. I believe it's joint with the Australian, not even military or government. It's deeper than that. But there seems to be a lot going on there anyway. But it's in time will be revealed, and by then, all this is going to be over anyway. On a positive note,
is this going to happen within our lifetime? What do you think, Winston?
Yeah. Well, let me give this bit of information. That is talking to one of the ones I talked to about how far along we are to realizing ascension in our third dimensional world as we're moving up. He estimated that we're about 29% there. And if we can eliminate this pedophilia problem, we're going to have a big jump. And if we can eliminate world poverty, we'll have another big jump. So the rapidity of ascension depends on a problem resolution, and these things are being worked on very, very heavily. So if we're already at 29 or 30% of the way there, and we can eliminate certainly these two big problems, that's going to be a major, major jump. Maybe we jump all the way to 75 or 80%, as we get rid of some of these things.
Did he mention what the other factors were that were?
No, these are things that I talk about.
Okay.
He just mentioned the 29%.
Okay.
There, but you know as well as I do, if we can get this pedophile thing solved, that's a huge jump. If we get rid of world poverty, that's another huge jump. Now, some of these, other problems that we deal with that prevent us from moving forward, toward that final event, as it were. I mean, we can work those things out, but actually, to be perfectly honest, at 29%, we're doing pretty darn good.
Yeah, it would be nice to hear if the number was higher, but you're right. So you're talking about pedophilia and child trafficking and using children in the sacrificial, these sacrifices with the Luciferians. You were talking about that kind of pedophilia, because that's
and not just on a organized basis, but how much of that goes on in the family homes.
Okay, so and poverty is another one, of course, and of course we'd have to talk about the banking and the debt slavery.
Yeah, we're working on the financial matrix to correct that, and when that's corrected, then that's another big huge jump. And so as we go into the humanitarians, we go into NESARA and also GESARA,
right,
which apparently 209 nations on the planet have signed on for. Now, when we can institute those things, the provisions within those programs will cause huge, huge jumps and leaps ahead. So we're not talking about 10, 15, or 17 years down the road. We're talking about, it depends on how quickly we can remove those impediments. Mm-hmm. And when we get rid of those things, we'll take huge leaps ahead.
Well, I think it was the same contact, that, if I'm not mistaken, I could be mistaken, but I think the first major leap in technology is going to be these replicators. Is this from your understanding?
Yeah, that'll be part of it, and that also is being corrected, because we talked about these 51,000 sealed indictments. I can guarantee there'd be a lot of people at the patent office that's going to have to answer for a whole lot.
True. Absolutely, there was a huge list of that. James, what's the realistically in terms of like this free energy or 0 point energy or over unity? What's the likelihood that these can roll out pretty quickly? And are we talking about how would we use this, not just to power our homes, but are you talking about creating new systems of transportation?
Well, I mean, right now it's already on there. I'm working with some physicists that have that technology already, And so that's why we're working with here at the ranch. We're creating a place where it can come forward, but we're working on making it bulletproof, because we do get a lot of attacks from everybody, from the agencies, certain things like that. I'm still dealing with that, and so we're working on getting this place bulletproof. But I see within the next 3 months, nothing's going to look the same over the next 3 months, and they aren't going to be able to stop this, any of it, because it's all part of our destiny. But we will have. We're building stuff ourselves right now, so we're
fantastic.
All of that very soon. It's coming out very soon, and I know the people that do have it are already signing contracts and making agreements to bring it out. So it is out here very soon, and the whole disclosure thing and everything. See, there is a controlled narrative, and that's why we brought out the uncontrolled narrative, because the reason these things aren't going forward is because all the press and all the money and all the assets are going to the planned opposition, and it's very controlled. And so, and until that changes, you're going to have the same thing. And Winston always says, like, follow the money or take away the money, stop, so that's the main thing that has to happen is people need to stop giving their assets and funds to these people and get nothing back like they have for over 60 years with some of these programs. So anyway, there comes a point where you have to realize, okay, let's take the next step. Who are these beings? Were they a part of our history? Why are they here? What do they have to offer? Can they give us a quantum leap in consciousness and restoring the earth and the environment, our own? And do they have a way of doing things like universal law? And they do. And that is why they're such a threat, because they do have all of this right now. And the controllers and the people want, the war and disease profiteers and all those guys keep the status. They don't want these changes to happen, but they're going to happen regardless. They can't stop it. It's part of our destiny. And the beings behind this destiny are beyond their imagination. They can do all the rituals they want, and they go nowhere. Because the ones that do the rituals too are being removed.
We're just having a little internet issue, little delay and stuff. I'm sorry, James. I don't mean to talk over you. So you're optimistic. What's that?
Yeah. I see it. I definitely see all these things coming together here, really. But I can see huge changes in the next 3 months. Are going to happen. Big changes, and there's going to be a lot of removals of people that a lot of people are mistakenly following, and they're actually, it's like that Stockholm syndrome. They're protecting their own enslavers, and they haven't figured it out yet, but all that's going to be made known here real soon.
That's an excellent point. I think that we can't underscore that, because we're going to see through President Trump draining the swamp that the ones that we had all trusted so much were the ones who were really committing treason. We saw a Project Veritas, several of their videos recently going underground into this democratic socialist group that apparently is infiltrating the Department of Justice, the FBI, and other organizations to undermine policy in our country, and even to slow down and cause the food stamp process to persist longer than it needs to, really causing misery on the planet. And we've got to get a handle on this. I think this is the part that we need to do. We need to get behind President Trump to help him do this. The question that I have, though, is that for some people, if you're not sure if you're communicating with a positive being, don't communicate with them. I mean, what do you suggest, James? Because there's some entities that are not positive. There's some beings that are not positive, some humans that aren't. So, how could you help people kind of, be comfortable with this idea, and how do they discern?
Well, but we have a saying, just because you're dead doesn't mean you're enlightened, and just because you're an ET, and so there are people that are pushing that they're all benevolent out is the most irresponsible thing I've ever heard on my life, and they know better, and they're actually, a lot of them are actually working with the ones that aren't benevolent. So we need to use discernment. we need to use universal law, and look at these people's behavior and are they creating universal peace? Are they, are they promoting sisterly love? Are they in service to humanity? Are they in self-service? Most of them are in self-service. They have a story and everything else, but when you find out where their assets go, it goes to some pretty selfish programs, and some of those programs are actually illegal. You must say, they involve the pedophile stuff and things like that. So,
right.
So it's do the research, follow the money, follow the money out, where that money's going, and talk to the people closest to them, their staff, and see. But most of them, some people actually force people to sign these non-programs, and they can't talk about what they've seen and what's happened and what they know, and they have teeth in very heavy-duty programs, and so they're afraid to talk. And I'll go, hey, you remember when this and this happened? And they go zip, zip, I'm not can't talking.
Right.
I don't want to get sued. I don't want to end up in court, and it's amazing. I've never seen anything like it.
Well, do you know what's going on in Antarctica? What's the deal? Why do we have a treaty with all countries when we can't agree on anything really else? We can't agree on human rights. We can't agree on finance policy, on foreign policy, on war. But we can certainly, all the countries can agree on not going into, not exploring the Antarctic continent. Why do you think that is?
I think they are exploring it. But they've signed agreement, and all of them are working together, to explore this thing. They do have agreements and things like that, but basically it's the antediluvian race. Had the big shift. They got buried under layers of ice. The technology, the genetics are still there. There's multiple races buried there. All that stuff is there, and so. I don't know who's controlling that whole operation, but it's all there, what they're going for.
The Nazis are controlling it.
The Nazis, because it seems like Admiral Byrd, this very, very well known. It's documented that he said there's an area as large as the United States that's completely unexplored. And the fact that we are, I think that we should, and he said that there was resources there. He said that they would be of particular interest to the United States. So why are we?
Because the United States is run by the Nazis. Go read Jim Marr's book; he'll point that out.
Right, and in terms of this contact, whether they're from other parts of the planet that we don't have access to, or whether they're from another planet, there's still other beings here, which I think that there's evidence for that.
Both positive and negative.
Right.
And it's like you hear people talking all the time. We're governed by Nazis and reptiles, and everybody puts them in the crazy box. But if you do the research, it certainly points in that direction.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Let me comment, Louisa, on the original question that you had asked James about how you discern who it is you're dealing with.
Sure.
And let me just make this recommendation. This is real simple. I mean, you just don't take any kind of, great mystical powers or anything. But if you're confronted with an individual that you don't know exactly how to deal with them, if you just simply look them in the eye and say, I love you, see how they react to that. If they keep the conversation going, it's probably somebody you want to talk to. If they don't, if they turn around and leave, then you know what kind of individual that is. Or another good one is, if you just say, Jesus loves you, and I love Jesus. See what they do.
Wow.
And if they have love in their heart, they'll respond favorably. If they're a dark entity, they'll turn and leave. That's just as simple as you can get.
We also have healing techniques here that it's in all the books. We teach people how to heal unseen negative influences, safeguards for you're working with, for pure channeling, all that stuff. I've written books on that, and it works. And And you can call in whoever you believe in. You can call in Buddha or Kuan Yin or Mary, or, you know, the reptiles hate Mary's energy. They hate that divine feminine. They can't stand it. Some really ruffles their scales. But you just call in those and do this simple technique that we have. It's on our website too. If you go to and use that. But Winston's right. Sometimes the simplest ones are the best. And, you know, I'd pull out all the stops. I'd say, you know, Jesus loves you. Buddha loves you. White Eagle loves you.
Right.
James Gilliland loves you.
Yeah.
In fact, we're going to call a couple of men to have a conversation with you. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's wonderful. Well, thanks for that, because I think it does help people to discern, because I think you know, there are people who well, look at the whole Billy Meyer case. That really was the first one to kind of really seed our consciousness with this. So it does look like this is a long-term plan, that there is that this is, you know, where we're, as you said, James, this is our fate, this is our destiny, this is you know, it's time for humanity to evolve out of this, you know, duality. It's really boring, and it's time to just move on so we can have, you know, a better life. Now, in terms of we're going to wrap it up now, and in terms of the I guess the humanitarian side of this, is there any updates that you have on that? Are we almost ready to really start preparing humanity for to end poverty? I mean, in terms of like the RV and things like that, is that something that we're preparing for?
Yeah, I want to go touch on Billy Meyer a little bit, because we're thinking what Billy Meyer have in common. But anyway, they you know, be aware of anybody that says only true prophet of God and they're their only contactee, and then demands 20% of your income. I would definitely walk away from that. And so some people start out really good, kind of end up really bad. And unfortunately, and they've been attacking us forever, because they do actually believe that they're the only true prophet of God, and that they're their only contactees on the planet, and they do 6% of your income. So you know, it's great one-stop shopping for God and need, and it's great for the pocketbook too. But anyway, we need to really use discernment in this thing, and on who we're working with. You know, some of the things might have been at the beginning, but almost all that's been debunked by that are on the top levels. You know, IBM people, things like that. Even the guy that made Adobe Shop debunked it. So there's things and overlays.
And he's an experiencer too.
Yeah, and he's an experiencer too. He's not on the dark side. But anyway, to go further in that, I think that it's like a push-pull thing. It's like whack-a-mole. All this stuff is trying to come forward. And as soon as it's all ready to happen, it comes forwards, pop up and block it, and they get whacked down. And it starts up again. It starts up again. We've had a lot of false starts. It's going to happen. And it's just a matter of, you know, it's going to happen. And I think the RV, I think the humanitarian funds, all that stuff is going to come out. And it's all tied, again, around this whole pedophilia movement. They told me when that goes down, everything else is going to come out. And they're the ones screaming the loudest against all stuff are the ones that are most guilty. So take everything CNN says and MSNBC or all those guys and reverse it, and you'll have more of the truth. And the ones screaming the loudest and making the motivation, reverse that, and that's what they're guilty of, you might say. So all that's being exposed, nothing's hidden, and it's part of this frequency shift we're going through. And you know, even Jesus said that no rock should be left unturned, and all the initial shouted from the rooftops, and that's what he's saying. There's a great uncovering, you know, all about, and this now. So these guys are going to do whatever they can do. They can delay it, but it's going to happen. And there's a lot of changes going on in upper management right now.
Right, exactly. Well, to close up, let me just ask you if there's anything that you wanted to talk about that we didn't, if you have any closing comments or final comments that you wanted to make for our viewers.
Just treat each other how you want to be treated. Quite simple. It's basic. But if we're doing that, all this is going to pass soon, and to go internal rather than be external and everything. And that's one of the main things as well. Love is the key, what I've been shown, and that vibration of love, nothing can mess with that. So if you bring everything back to the heart, use discernment and walk in your truth, that's all we need to do individually and as a collective.
Yeah, it's a challenge to do that sometimes. There's some days are easier than others. James, did you have any closing comments or final comments?
Peter kind of summed it up. They say on these two lie all the laws and the prophets, and love created with all your heart and love your neighbors yourself. It's really that simple. But we also mind to the environment and the earth as well. And those those are the basics. If we all just stuck to those, and before you do anything that's going to cause harm or loss to another person, just put yourself in that person's shoes and just say, do I really want to do this? Anything that's going to cause harm to the planet, everything's connected. Nothing's not connected. So whatever you do to others or whatever you do to the planet always returns back to the same point. And so it's just universal law, and we need to start operating from universal law and just start being kind to each other and being kind to the planet, basically.
Because Chewbacca says so, isn't that right?
That's it.
Yeah.
Chewbacca says so. Oh, Chewie, isn't he the best? Look at that. He's the best. He's there. He's here just special for our interview today. And James, you have some on your property, don't you?
Yeah, we rents and plaster casts and a lot of sightings. A lot of people have had experiences. So it's they're benevolent. They're the height of the nature kingdom, and they can shapeshift and disappear and reappear. And we had a lot of that going on here, but same thing. Be nice to them; they'll be nice back. If you go out there with ill intent, you might have an experience, and it may not be a good one.
I see. Winston, let me ask you, thank you so much for co-hosting with me. And Chewbacca's very happy Winston's here. Winston, do you have any final comments or anything? Or did you like to
people listen to me all the time on these programs and stuff, but I really genuinely appreciate, James and Peter coming on and sharing with people, some things. And so I just, like I say, I endorse what they just told you. Let me put it that way.
Very good. Well, Winston, thank you so much for being with us today and joining me to interview Peter Maxwell Slattery and James Gilliland, our friends from ECETI in Trout Lake, Washington, and ECETI from Australia. So thank you so much for joining us, for being with us, and may the force be with you. May the force be with you. And into our future. And that's it, folks. If you want to find out more about ECETI, you can, I'll put the links in the description section of the video, and you can start trying to have more conversations and do our part by seeding the conversations with, information about this and about getting yourself ready, going within and getting yourself ready and prepared so we can all evolve. Let's just evolve already. We need to move on. Thank you, James. Thank you, Peter.
Check out ECETI Stargate, too. All that information and footage is up there as well.
Right, ECETI Stargate on YouTube. We'll have those links in the description section. And also, James, we'll have your you will have your website. Now, do you have a website, Peter, separate from that? Or?
Yeah, but there's links to this one anyway, so just go there. That's fine.
Okay, good. There's a link, James, to Peter from your site?
Oh, yeah. They're all
there is.
Together.
Okay, just double checking because I wasn't sure. So good luck to both of you. Thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure to have you both on Goldfish Report. We hope you'll come back again.
Bye, Chewbacca.
Will do. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for viewing, and this concludes this edition of the Goldfish Report.